Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. The Ukraine War news update, the third part thereof for the 7th of December 2023. I'm a little bit behind today. I do apologise, but thank you so much to Stephen Churchill who gave a donation to the channel, supported the channel and on PayPal and just said, you know, check out this band as a hint, Daka Braka. And they're going to play in January in Brighton, which is vaguely near you. I went to college in Brighton. They're a Ukrainian band. Anyway, I've just been down a rabbit hole, as you do when you come across things on YouTube. This KEXP performance of Daka Braka, just insane. It's just these guys are immensely talented in ways that are just really, really, really original. Really very good stuff. I guess it's like folk Ukrainian with lots of twists and just like out there. Yeah, incredible. So I think I might have a little bit of a continued rabbit hole experience with Daka Braka. So my advice to you is particularly find this. Probably there's lots out there, actually, quite a few live videos. I haven't done anything there's nothing really on YouTube for the last 3 years particularly. There's a couple from 2 years ago, but really most of it's older stuff, but it is it's something to look out for. So that's my hint for today, a bit of Daka Braka time. Right, let's go to the geopolitical news that I was unable to do because my last video took way too long, or maybe not long enough, depends what floats your boat. Okay, so this is from, well, researchers have tracked more activity by an influence campaign linked to Russia that spreads disinformation and propaganda in the US, Germany, and Ukraine through a vast network of social media accounts and fake websites. Okay, if you remember, I went through, I looked at Chuck Schumer's announcement on Twitter, and under that straight away was just a bunch of people absolutely piling on Chuck Schumer. And I looked at the first one on there, and I was like, I'm pretty sure this is a Russian troll. And then looked on their thread and a recommended person on there with an almost identical kind of like description or the way that was structured, and it's like, these look like Russian trolls. And I've done separate videos on Russian trolls and bot farms. You should go and check those videos out. I've done, just put in the search for ATP Geopolitics troll bots, and some videos that I go into some detail about this phenomenon, or these phenomena. This is a real challenge. So I've talked previously, and I talked with John Sweeney about how the war in Ukraine, on the battlefields of Ukraine, needs to be won so that we can win the war in the information space with Russia. And it's a war I think that Russia are winning when you look at the impact on the nations around the world, on political movements around the world, of elections in Europe. And indeed, the US, UK, Latin America, they're now supposedly aiming for it. I think Vladimir Putin is one of the most effective politicians in the world in living memory. He has had the most effect on individual nations, of collective institutions, than any other human being I can think of. 25 years to do that, admittedly, but he is there, fingers in so many pies, fingerprints on so many elections and so many areas of discontent. Anyway, the campaign attributed is called Doppelganger. So researchers have tracked more activity to this influence campaign linked to Russia. The campaign attributed to the Russian linked influence operation network called Doppelganger has been active since at least May 2022. The US tech company Meta, so that is Facebook, previously referred to Doppelganger as the largest and most aggressively persistent malign network sponsored by Russia. And they're currently researchers from Recorded Futures Insect Group are currently tracking over 2,000 inauthentic social media accounts associated with Doppelganger, but the number may be even higher than that. And they say Doppelganger's activity is worth paying attention to, even though they reckon it hasn't had like massive impact, and they are onto it, but it's worth paying attention to, researchers said, as its operators are constantly improving their tools and tactics and are willing to invest in extra measures to evade detection. Meta warned last week that foreign groups are looking to expand their influence operations as 2024 is the most important year for elections around the world in history. Insect did not specify which social media networks the Doppelganger operation used. I mean, well, I know trolls in my own threads. I've seen trolls on Twitter an awful lot. And I'm sure, many other platforms too. In a campaign analysed by INSICT, Doppelganger focused on 3 targets: Ukraine, Germany, and the US. And now that's interesting in and of itself. Why Ukraine? Obviously Ukraine. Okay, why the US? Well, the US are the biggest threat to Russia, along with the EU. I often say the EU is the biggest threat to Russia because it's geographical closeness. But in terms of this war, the US is a massive threat to Russia in terms of being able to supply Ukraine with the weapons it needs. The difference between Ukraine prevailing and not prevailing is the US, right? And what is going on now in the Congress, you could argue, has its fingerprints, has Russian fingerprints over it. And even if it's not directly, it's indirectly by presenting so much news, so much disinformation for the general public to lap up, and also for lawmakers to lap up, or to reflect the general public who have lapped up that disinformation, so that these attitudes and these narratives then find their way into people like Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, oh my goodness, if you saw the GOP primary debate last night, I meant to mention this in the last video because it is kind of pertinent, I guess, to what's going on in Congress. But the last GOP, so to those who, I have a lot of international viewers, might not know. So the GOP is a Republican party, the Grand Old Party. They are you've got a 2-party system in the US. You've got Democrats and Republicans. Democrats at the moment have control of the Senate just by 1. They have the president, but they don't have the House. Although Kevin McCarthy's just said, so the former speaker has just said he's stepping down, and that will happen before Christmas. You've got another one joining. He's going to be on the board of his university or college or something. You've got George Santos has just been done for ethics. And it's looking like Matt Gaetz might be done for ethics eventually. That may happen. Kevin McCarthy was talking about a lot about that. So you might have. So at the moment, by the end of this year, it's looking like the majority for the Republicans in the House might only be 2. That's going to be a challenge for them. But anyway, I digress. So you've got the Republicans who had a primary, the last debate to see who's going to be the most, I guess, get the most traction for becoming the candidate for the Republican Party to run for president. Now, Trump hasn't turned up to a single debate because he doesn't seem to need to, and he probably hasn't needed to. And in fact, he might have just embarrassed himself maybe by putting his foot wrong. And what I'm trying to say is, it could have been a risk for him. It's probably a sensible decision not to go to the primary debates because he's so far ahead in the polls. Now, the debate last night was just insane. They spent 17 minutes talking about trans toilets. And hello, have you seen what's going on around the world? But that is about the narrative. It's about culture wars. It's about stuff that's effectively not meaningless, but it has very little impact on the day-to-day living of anyone. Really, like trans toilets. I mean, seriously, is that what you're going to spend 17 minutes talking about? What is wrong with you? But of course, what they look at focus groups. They look at, everyone's really worried about woke this and woke that. So what about policies? What about how you're going to change the lives of people in America? How are you going to change the people's futures in really meaningful ways? What are you going to do with the economy? What are you going to do with X, Y, and Z? And you had a couple of interesting moments. So Nikki Haley was pretty quiet in the whole thing, and I think she was kind of told to be, and that was probably good, but I think she was too quiet. But that was interesting because it's kind of let these guys go mental. You are ahead of these guys, but you're never going to challenge Trump. But would he choose her as a running mate? I don't know. I don't think so. But nevertheless, she was quite quiet. Vivek Ramaswamy was mental. I mean, that guy is nuts. He's trying to be Trump 2.0. But he's just, the stuff he says is absolute. He was anti-environment. Not like, oh, I'm not up for grit. Like, anti-environment. Like, literally, like, do you hate the environment? Do you just not want trees in the world? Like, it's just weird. And then conspiracy theories right up and down. But Chris Christie was interesting. So he came out on top quite easily, I think. And he came out on top for a number of reasons. Just he was kind of sensible and moderate. He did a really good thing in defending Nikki Haley, who was getting ad hominem attacks by Vivek Ramaswamy. And he defended her really well. It's like, no, 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 no. It's like, what is this? What are you doing? This is just be beneath that kind of rhetoric. This is you're going to run. You're looking to run the country, and here you are slagging off other people in a really kind of juvenile way. But anyway, but Chris Christie was also the only one who was vehemently and openly anti-Trump. Is like, and he got a few boos for that. Actually, Vivek Ramaswamy got some boos as well. But it's like, you can boo me, but like, this is reality. He's up for all these counts of X, Y, and Z, and we added to the debt by trillions, like etc. etc. Try to bring the facts to the table. But anyway, it was just really, really shows that basically Ron DeSantis was poor, that Ramaswamy was poor. I thought Nikki Haley was quiet and Chris Christie was half decent. But none of them are going to challenge Trump. And so when you're looking at Ukraine going forward, if Trump gets in, legal issues aside, and that itself could be the end of his campaign. But if he gets in, is he going to reflect these narratives that have been being pumped out by Russia? Is he going to reflect these disinformed positions that people are taking? Is just really worrying. Anyway, for example, it says, I'll get back to this article. For example, some of them suggested that the US prioritizes the war in Israel more than the one in Ukraine, or sowed doubts about Ukraine's ability to win the war. So these are these Russian narratives. Again, being divisive with, and goodness me, I have two sides of the Israel-Palestine conflict on my thread, and I have Americans going nuts from each side of that. And it's absolute polarization. And I've got some people are like starting to retweet who were previously like far right people who have gone anti-Semitic to the max. But it's really weird because they're then siding with the far left in being pro-Palestine, and just really weird positions of like anti-Semitic far right ultra nationalists siding with far left pro-Palestine because of just like all this stuff. It's crazy. But anyway, there are fingerprints of the Russians all over this. In a campaign that targeted Germany. And why Germany? So Germany are also targeted because they, without the US in it, who are the biggest threat to Russia, well, Germany within, as you can see with what they've been given in terms of, they're now the second biggest donor to Ukraine. So target the US, target Germany, and target Ukraine, and that's what's going on. So a Russian network operator created fake news outlets in Germany, producing propaganda content, which was then shared on social media, the researchers said. Unlike impersonating existing Western news sources, as commonly seen with doppelgangers so far, these outlets appear to be an attempt to create seemingly new and original sources, which researchers said. Quote, this evolving approach likely aims to establish a long-term influence network by evading detection efforts to identify inauthentic impersonators. The campaign's goal in Germany was to share fake narratives of Germany's domestic decline due to migration, economic policies, and continued support for Ukraine, Insikt said. In the US, the threat actor promoted hostile articles, criticized the LGBTQ plus movement, which was recently outlawed in Russia, and raised doubts about US military competence. One of the fake websites linked to Doppelganger produced election-related content, which was largely generated by artificial intelligence. So AI is going to be playing a major part in disinformation campaigns from now on. You can bet your bottom dollar. You don't have to get people to pay people to sit at desks and create content. You can just here are the parameters, press go, there you go, send it out. This campaign likely intends to exploit US societal and political divisions ahead of the 2024 US election, researchers said. So this is a real worry that this kind of stuff is out there, and it's out there with increasing frequency. And it's a challenge to us all. Right. Biden urges Congress to approve the Ukraine aid bill and slams Republicans over inaction. I reported on that previously. So he urged Congress to press the Ukraine aid bill on December the 6th as the Senate prepares for the first procedural vote. And of course, that failed, and he got angry about that. At the same time, Putin is arriving in the United Arab Emirates on the first leg of his Middle Eastern trip. He is going to the global south, and he is doing on the charm offensive. He doesn't go abroad often at the moment. The fact that he is going to UAE, and this is one of the countries that is producing an awful lot of exporting to Russia, an awful lot of dual purpose goods that have components that Russia can use in their defense manufacturing industries. This is a worry, and he's then just you know siding up to the UAE and then Saudi Arabia in a way that I think is a real challenge for Ukraine and for the West. Anyway, Russian dictator Putin arrived in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, for the first part of a one-day Middle Eastern trip. That also includes a visit to Saudi Arabia. A Russian state-run news agency TASS reported yesterday it is his first trip to the region since 2019. He has made only a few trips abroad in 2023 after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant in March for his role in the deportations of Ukrainian children. Now, US charges 4 Russian soldiers with torture and abuses against an American in Ukraine. This is a really big move. So the suspects held the victim for 10 days. So this is an American victim. He was held for 10 days, stripping him naked, beating him and performing a mock execution, the Justice Department said. This is the Americans getting involved in a war crimes in a Russian war crime and making accusations. So, quote, as the world has witnessed the horrors of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, so has the United States Department of Justice, said Attorney General Merrick Garland. Quote, that is why the Justice Department has filed the first ever charges under the US war crime statute against 4 Russian affiliated military personnel for heinous crimes against an American citizen. I think that's pretty significant, personally. The Dutch foreign minister has said Ukraine will be finished if it cannot fight Russia. So Ukraine has no choice but to keep fighting the Russian invasion, since an end to their fight would mean the end to their country, Dutch foreign minister Hanke Bruins Slot told Dutch radio station BNR a couple of days ago. And this obviously implies that without assistance to Ukraine, Ukraine will be unable to continue that fight. Now, US-Swedish defense agreement has granted the US access to 17 military bases in Sweden, including 5 air bases and 1 airport. The agreement does not mention nuclear weapons or nuclear policy, but has cryptic reference to certain types of weapons. Scare quotes, certain types. I think this is really significant. So, Russia didn't want NATO to expand, but NATO expanded to include what it looks like it's going to include Sweden, but certainly has Finland looking to get Sweden. And at the same time, the US then now has access to Swedish bases much closer to Russia than Russia would be comfortable with. This is Russia Putin shooting himself in the foot. I don't want you doing this, so I'm going to invade Ukraine. Oh, you've done that even more and much quicker than otherwise would have happened. Not my wildest nightmares, says Putin, would this have happened had I not invaded Ukraine. But I invaded Ukraine so that this wouldn't happen. It's just such a shot in the foot. I think stuff like this is representative of an uptick in military activity, just general international military activity. We were seeing, I guess, the US Army receding from Europe. We've seen the UK military receding from Germany. German bases don't have as many, as far as I know, international units based there and so on and so forth. Well, I think all that kind of stuff is going to be reversed now. Right, going on to the border issues with Poland and Slovakia in terms of Ukraine. Union of Motor Carriers of Slovakia is again threatening to completely block the checkpoint on the border with Ukraine. This is stated in a statement ahead of UNAS, so that's at Union, Stanislav Skala. Slovak carriers demand to resolve the situation with a return to the permit system of Ukrainian truckers. So these genuine issues that exist between the truckers of the European truckers and the Ukrainian truckers that I've talked about previously, but also possibly fingerprints of Russia on these protests. Now, these protests are costing Ukraine a whole heap of money, and that money aids the defense of their country. So this is super, super important, and yet this is continuing. They'd stopped the ones in Ukraine. In Slovakia, it looks like they are going to start them up again, and the ones in Poland are still as problematic as they were. Polish trucker blockade of Ukrainian haulers heads toward the 1 month mark, and it takes its toll on Ukrainian businesses. We have an awful lot of effect on the Ukrainian economy. So the Federation of Employers of Ukraine and Industry Association put the direct losses to the country's economy at around 400 million euros. as of the 22nd, so that is 2 weeks out of date plus. Taras Kachka, Ukraine's trade representative, told Reuters that Ukrainian exports by truck over the first 26 days of November, again 2 weeks out of date, were $465 million, down from $614 million in October. So the exports, the truck exports are down, imports are down, everything's down. If the blockade of the Ukrainian border is a problem for the Polish economy, then for Ukraine it's a catastrophe, says Vladimir Poporyshnyuk, co-founder of Ukraine's private postal service giant Nova Pochta. Ukraine's western border has been a major lifeline for Ukrainian companies amid Russia's full-scale invasion and near-total blockade of Ukraine's Black Sea ports. Ukrainian retailers with whom the Kyiv Independent spoke today say the blockade has significantly complicated the delivery of imports to the country. Increasing capacity of other border crossings is nearly impossible to do quickly, forcing companies to forego some imports altogether. The only bright spot recently was news that Ukrainian and Polish officials had agreed to allow empty heavy-duty vehicles with a total permissible weight of over 7.5 metric tons through the Ugriniv Dolichuk checkpoint. So there was this stack going back into Ukraine of empty lorries to get back into Europe, and that has now been well, I don't know if it's been fully cleared, but they're working to clear that. The entry of empty trucks into Ukraine is no help to Ukrainian truck retailers who import goods from abroad. So yeah, that's actually should read: the entry of empty trucks into Poland is no help to Ukrainian retailers who import goods from abroad for their customers. However, companies are warning that if the situation continues, the following month could lead not only to shortages but increased prices for consumers. Quote, in the first week, according to preliminary estimates by some major retail chains, the border blockade decreased turnover by approximately $2.7 million per week for one business entity. Natalia Petrivska, executive director of Ukrainian Food Retail Alliance, told the Kyiv Independent, quote, speaking overall about Ukrainian businesses, the losses for entrepreneurs will be estimated in billions of hryvnias. Oko, one of Ukraine's largest gas station chains, said the cost of transporting fuel has recently increased from $60 to $180 per ton of fuel. That's increased by 3 times. That's huge. As a result, railway transportation has become faster and more cost-effective, Oko CEO Vasyl Danilyak told the Kyiv Independent, adding that the business has quickly shifted toward railway deliveries of fuel. In so doing, the company, quote, did not contribute to excess congestion at the border with our own shipments, he said. So, yeah, there are ways around this, and there's talk in this article about going round into other places like through Hungary, through Romania. Before the blockade, a single truck could take 3 to 4 trips between Ukraine and Europe in a month, but now they need help to complete even one trip. Due to increased demand for transportation and difficulties in crossing the border, the cost of logistics has significantly risen. I mean, there's lots more in this article. This is a huge challenge, and it's not good for relations between these countries either. Okay, the G7 group of seven sort of biggest economies of the world to ban direct import of Russian, or at least give or take, is to ban direct import of Russian diamonds from January. The leaders of the G7 countries agreed on December the 6th to impose a direct import ban on Russian diamonds starting January in a bid to stifle Moscow's revenue during its invasion of Ukraine. And then we're going to look just for a little bit at Russian oil revenues here. So 1 year of sanctions, Russia's oil export revenues are cut by 34 billion euros. So this is a significant cut. As you can see, they went up and then have back from, at the beginning of the year where sanctions working really well. They have bounced up, come down, gone up, and then actually are coming down a little bit now, but there will be lots of variables involved in this. This will hit Russia's revenues and reduce its ability to wage war in Ukraine, said EU Commission President von der Leyen 1 year ago about the US dollar, the $60 a barrel price cap and import ban. During the first year of the sanctions, the EU ban on Russian oil and the G7 price cap had cost an estimated $34 billion in lost oil export revenue, lowering export earnings by 14%. The sanctions have worked mainly by lowering Russian oil prices compared to global prices. So the Urals is the red line, Brent is the blue, ESPO is orange. The price cap has had an impact but failed to live up to its potential. The price difference on Russian oil and benchmark global oil has declined since early 2023, showing effectiveness of sanctions has fallen. So you can see there's quite a big difference between Urals and Brent back here in 2022. And then, although it's tracked, those prices have tracked, it is that gap has but squeezed closer and closer to where we are now, and that is the challenge. The price difference, so has declined. The impact took place in where were we in 2023 H1, peaking at 180 million euros per day in 2023 quarter one. Okay, the declining effect of sanctions is due to failure of G7 and EU to enforce and strengthen the price cap. The failure has enabled Russia to sell above the price cap and increase exports to new non-sanctioning buyers. So not only can they at times sell above the price cap, they can get around it, and those are the loopholes that that the West are looking to stop. And they've got these shadow fleets, and there's an awful lot of talk. There's, I think, a report on the shadow fleets that came out recently. One of the media, it might be Bloomberg, did a whole report on them or a video on them. But this failure has enabled Russia to sell above that price cap, and they are selling to people like, this is an interesting mix of countries, so let's see if I can get these flags right. Myanmar, Ghana, Brazil, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Tunisia, I think that is. So those are nations. Oh, yeah. Oh, it says it on the left. Well done, Pierce. Yeah, got it. Well, got the flags and the initials right, so you couldn't really go wrong. Anyway, so those nations are buying an awful lot, and by the looks of it, Myanmar, they're buying an awful lot, and they'll be probably selling it on to other nations as well, probably back to the EU. Derogations are also being exploited by Russia. Bulgaria's Bargas refinery has imported crude oil worth over 1.1 billion euros in tax revenue to the Kremlin since EU's import ban on Russian crude. So that is a huge challenge, isn't it? Since the start of sanctions, Russian reliance on shadow tankers owned or insured in countries that do not implement the price cap has also increased by 82%. In October, 62% of Russian crude was transported by shadow tankers. Wow. And the G7 and EU have had to grip on Russia's oil exports but have not flexed it. In October 2023, 48% of Russian oil shipments were carried on tankers owned or insured in G7 and EU countries. Enforcement, lower price cap, and curtailing refining loopholes and shadow tankers can increase the sanctions impact. CREA, Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air, stands with Ukraine and calls for the EU Commission to adopt urgently a 12th sanctions package against Russia that includes monitoring and enforcement of sanctions and LNG and LPG bans. So they are working hard on that one. So yeah, interesting analysis and a bunch of figures there that I think show that, yeah, it has worked and Russia are making less money, but that's, it's still a lot of work still to do. Right, this is arguably not directly connected to Ukraine, but worthy of note. So Giorgia Meloni, the Italian premier, has just sent an official note to Beijing notifying Xi Jinping that Italy is quitting China's Belt and Road Initiative. Italy has formally exited China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, dealing a blow to President Xi Jinping, who's trying to revive the mega infrastructure project. Italy became the only G7 nation to sign up to that 4 years ago. What is a Belt and Road Initiative? So it's something I talk about now and again. It's known within China as a One Belt, One Road. Is a global infrastructure development strategy adopted by the Chinese government in 2013 to invest in more than 150 countries and international organizations. It's considered a centerpiece of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's foreign policy. The BRI forms a central component of his major country diplomacy strategy, which calls for China to assume a greater leadership role for global affairs in accordance with its rising power and status. It's been compared to the American Marshall Plan. as of August 2023, 155 countries were listed as having signed up to the BRI. The participating countries include almost 75% of the world's population and account for more than half of the world's GDP. But this is massive, right? They are also having increased presence in Africa, and yeah, this is all over the world. And this is a challenge, obviously, to the US kind of hegemony and maybe European and Western hegemony, but it's also has some, I guess, well, it definitely has security implications. It has economic implications, strategic implications for probably for every nation in the world, really, and it does things like this. So it happened with in Sri Lanka and Colombo, sorry, the capital there, where they financed the ports. They said, right, we're financing this port, but in the small print was, if you default on this, China will own the port. And Sri Lanka went through, all sorts of issues and defaulted, and now China own the port. And it just, wow, they are gaining these pieces of infrastructure, if not access to them, the actual infrastructure itself or themselves around the world. They are spreading their influence around 75% of the world's population. This is a really big thing, and for Italy to pull out of that as the only G7 nation signed up to it is a big thing. And I think that is good, but it's definitely something to watch out for. And something else to watch out for is this: what's going on in Venezuela. So they're kind of hoping to help themselves to a part of Guyana that has huge oil reserves. They've just been discovered, and suddenly Venezuela are like, we never sorted out exactly what the borders were, and it was never like fully ratified. Well, we're having that, thank you very much. And we've got an army, and you haven't really got an army, Guyana. Yeah, well, sorry about that, but we're going to take advantage of that situation. And anyway, we've redrawn the borders. Turns out that we own all that oil now. Who knew? This is a massive, just, I don't know, huge international problem that is waiting to bubble over. And I don't think it's going to wait too much longer. Maduro, he's the kind of Venezuelan dictator's decision to annex large parts of Guyana in order to secure the vast oil and gas resources in an expectable result of Russia's largely unpunished, that's my phone going off, largely unpunished annexation of Crimea. As long as the original sin hasn't been fixed, more will follow that development, with World War III being the logical end result. So what Tendar is doing here is connecting this to Ukraine, which is to say that no one really did anything about Crimea being annexed. And what that says to other nations is that, do you know what? We can annex other parts of territories that are adjacent to ours or that we feel that we need. And no one's going to do anything about it, because no one did anything to Russia. And look what's going on with Ukraine at the moment. Look what's happening in Congress in the US. They can't decide whether they want to help or not. Well, we might as well help it. But in a kind of, if I'm taking my moral compass out of this, if I'm taking my emotional evaluation out of this, from a purely strategic point of view, and if I was Venezuelan and I was like, right, my one remit is to make sure Venezuela has as much stuff as it can get its hands on, right? If that's what my remit is, the calculation would be, we might as well help ourselves to that, because America can't even decide whether it wants to help Israel at the moment. They're all undecided who the good guys and bad guys are. They're not helping Ukraine. Putin's invaded. He's annexed four areas there officially, but he's got his hands on most of them from 2014, and that's still going on. So everyone's backs are turned, or distraction inside their own country in terms of their own borders, and trans toilets and all that, and Ukraine. We'll have some of Guyana, thank you very much. No one's really looking. Let's do it. Yeah, it's slightly worrying. So you can make definite connections, I think, to Ukraine, in the lessons people can learn, that if you don't punish bad guys, then people look. So you can map this to individual human psychology. So when we talk about punishment, crime and punishment, we talk about deterrence. Deterrence doesn't actually work very well. It has a very minimal effect on human behavior. You can have you can get your hand cut off if you're going to steal something. It doesn't really affect whether people are going to steal or not. That really harsh punishment, because people have this bias thinking they are basically invincible, kind of invincibility bias, where you think, well, I'll never get caught. I know it's a really harsh punishment, but they won't catch me. What does have an effect on human behavior is the percentage chance of getting caught, or your perception of the percentage chance of getting caught. In other words, like if I'm going to go and steal a loaf of bread from my local shop, like, one, what's the punishment like? Oh, it's really harsh. But two, if I don't think I'm going to get caught, it doesn't matter if it's harsh because I don't think I'm going to get caught. So I'm going to nick it. Generally speaking, obviously there's obviously moral fibre and all sorts of other things come into this, but what does have an effect on behaviour is a percentage chance, or my perception of getting caught. So if I think, well, I've got a 99% chance of getting caught doing that, then I won't do it. So you map individual human behaviour. I can show you like papers on what I've just claimed, right? Because I wrote about this for one of my chapters on if you care about it, in one of my last books, which is this book. Anyway. On whether or not hell exists, and the thing about hell being a deterrent, but actually it's a percentage chance of getting caught. So harsh punishments don't work as a deterrent. But so if nations work on these individual kind of human behavioural trends, then nations will justifiably look at things like the annexation of Crimea and say, well, we're not really going to get caught if we do this, because look, Russia didn't really get caught. No one did anything about it. They got away with it, so we can get away with it. It's not going to change my behaviour. Morality doesn't play a part here because, hey, oil and money, right? So oil and money, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to get caught, or there is no punishment. It's kind of wrapped up, I guess, the lack of deterrence in terms of there's a lack of punishment, and because like, people know you're going to do it, so it's slightly different. Like, I'm going to get caught, but I'm not really going to get caught because everyone's going to turn a sort of blind eye. What happened with Crimea? It's like, yeah, we know you did it. Yeah, let you get away with it, or such pathetic punishments that there's absolutely no chance of that acting as a deterrence from either direction. And so here we have Venezuela doing what it's doing. Anyway, sorry, just digressing there. Hopefully that was of interest. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. And go and check out some Daka Braka. Why not? Guys, little pips.